So, hi everyone. I usually talk about sex, and I can feel all the adults in the room kind of stiffening up already. This is natural. Most people find it kind of off-putting. Some people find it a little bit amusing. Regardless of how you feel about it, bear with me for just this talk. Now, India has a really rich history, ranging from the Kama Sutra to traditional sculptures. If nothing else, I think our population trends would indicate that at least people are thinking about sex. But why is it still so taboo? So I started Pratisandhi Foundation, an organization that works on comprehensive sexuality education for young people when I was about 17 years old. I was still in high school at the time. And I wanted to really ask, well, what's so weird about this topic? Because all my friends were asking the questions, I was asking the questions. So what's going on? And when you talk about sex as much as I do in a country like India, you get to hear a lot of very interesting questions. So now these are some questions that I've had to answer from 12-year-olds, which range from things like, is my penis going to fall off if I masturbate too much? Or will I lose my virginity if I kiss somebody? Or is crying during sex normal, or is that something that just happens in movies? And if anyone in this room is wondering, the answers to those questions are no, and mostly. But the thing is, it's not always that easy to talk about something like sex education in a place like India. So you can imagine my intrigue when a religious school reached out to me and they said, well, we want sex education workshops for children. I said, well, that's fantastic. They said, but here's the thing, you can't say the word sex. I said, well, that makes sex education a little bit tricky, don't you think? But I am a lawyer in training, and I thought, well, maybe I can get away with some euphemisms, Maybe if I hold up a flower every time I want to say the word, or if I said Netflix and chill instead of the word. The school was not very pleased with that, as you can imagine. But nonetheless, I said, you know what? Okay, I'm up for a challenge. I will not use the word sex, but I will deliver a sex education workshop. Now this was going to be a challenge, but I had confidence in my abilities because I had been doing this for a very long time, and if nothing else, I had quite learnt my lesson working with a lot of different schools over the years. So I geared up for this workshop, and I was sitting in a room with 14-year-olds, and I posed a very straightforward question, and we'll do this activity here as well. So if your partner gets angry at you for talking to somebody else, do you think that's a red flag, or do you think that's a green flag? Now, how many of you think that's a green flag? Nobody. Few people, few hands, okay. Some people think that's a green flag. How many of us think that's a bit of a red flag? Okay, quite a lot of us, right. Well, I saw similar patterns in the school where I was, but it was something that I had kind of known intuitively, but oddly I had never seen it so starkly in front of me. And the only reason I noticed it is because in that school, girls and boys were made to sit separately. And the thing I noticed was that boys were more likely to say that getting angry at your partner was a green flag, and girls were more likely to say that it was a red flag. Now this could just be a matter of that school. It may not apply more generally, but it's a pattern that I've observed. And something that I noticed was maybe we're sending very, very different messages about relationships and boundaries to boys and girls. So I thought, okay, well, let me figure out what's going on. So I asked them, okay, well, why do you think it's a green flag? So I asked one of the boys, and they said, well, it's only natural to feel a little bit insecure with your partner, what happens if they're going out with this person and they're not telling you? What if they're keeping secrets from you? Fair point, absolutely valid. I asked one of the girls, well, why do you think it's a red flag? She said, well, that's just your partner being controlling and they're being jealous, and this is absolutely toxic behavior. Also fair, also valid. Both of these points were coming from a place of their own lived experiences. What they had seen in the media, what they had seen their friends experiencing, and I've seen similar patterns with my own friends. This is not at all limited to 14-year-olds. I have very much seen this exist even with 45-year-olds. So midlife crisis, quarter-life crisis, tween crisis, it is applicable all around. But I think what that workshop gave us the opportunity to do, and by asking this question, what I was trying to get at, is really having a bit of a dialogue, right? Understanding each other's perspectives. Because quite frankly, this is not a question that should be easy to answer. Because you don't have all the information, right? All I've told you is, well, one partner is getting angry when they talk to someone else. I haven't told you who the partner is. I haven't told you what they're talking about, where they're talking. You don't know who the somebody else is. So it's a bit challenging, but of course from context you can infer what I'm talking about, right? Then I decided, let me add a little bit more spice since we're having a discussion. So I said, okay, what if the partner getting angry is a girl? What then? She's getting angry that her boyfriend's talking to somebody else, and how do you feel about that? I asked the same question again, but if the partner was a boy, and if the girl's the one getting angry. So now I've provided a little bit more information about who's having these conversations. And suddenly, all of that dialogue and progress that we had made talking about, trust and communication in a relationship, suddenly all that went out of the window. And suddenly it was just like, no, crazy ex-girlfriends and no, boys are just like that. All of the same scripts that we saw in the media started to come back. And the reason I think they came back, and one thing that I also observed is the tone of conversation gradually became more and more aggressive because everyone was starting to defend their point of view. Well, no, girlfriends are like this and boyfriends are like that and they do this and they do that. And suddenly, our voice was rising, we were getting agitated. And I thought, well, why are we getting so agitated? This is an open forum. I've just given you a little bit more information. So what's going on? And I realized it's because when our lived realities feel challenged, we get defensive. And we can't talk about lived realities in a 30-second reel. We can't talk about lived realities with the same level of nuance. I can't give you more information in a 5-minute talk than what I just gave, right? And that's what's happening. This was already happening even before social media picked up, and this is still happening, and the gap is kind of widening with social media. Because now it's kind of become about moral victories, right? It's like mic drop moments. Oh, they said this, but what about this case? So, for every dowry death headline we read, we also have comments talking about, well, what about the family? And what about, all of these other cases that are happening? But we don't want to talk about the issues. And this is what has gone wrong with whatever version of sex education we had for so long. Because we have this script suddenly of, well, girls, you need to protect yourself, and you need to be careful, and you need to stay virtuous. And with boys, we've been saying, well, you can kind of do what you want, but you have to be cautious. Sometimes they'll say, oh, try and be respectful, but the lessons we're giving to young girls and boys are quite distorted. And what's happening is there's no middle ground. Even now when I go for workshops, I'm consistently told, well, separate the boys and girls, we do the sessions for them separately. But well, if they're not talking to each other about each other, then how is any dialogue really going to happen? And we've become so quick to label each other. This is a toxic man, she's a feminazi, all of these terms. And I can see a lot of you smiling, so I imagine some of you at least resonate. But the thing is with social media, you see really only the very extremes, right? So for every conversation about a trans person wanting to engage in sports or swimming competition, for every headline that reads that, there's also a much higher rate of suicide among trans youths in schools, who we are not talking about. For every woman who seems to manifest this version of extreme feminist ideals, for every one woman like that, there's so many other women who are just scared to walk home, right? For every man online that is, spouting information about being an alpha man, there is also so many young boys who are feeling the pressures of changing expectations. So I think a lot of what is getting missed out in these conversations is those lived realities. So in this workshop, I kept talking to students about, boundaries and relationships and what does all of this really mean for us? How do we foster trust with each other? How do we foster communication with each other? And how do we really critically think about what we are seeing online? And this teacher walks up to me during the break in the workshop and she says, well, Nidhi, this is all really great, but what does this have to do with sex? I said, well, absolutely everything. Because sex education really is not about sex. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Conversations around contraceptives and STI prevention, all of that comes later. What you really need to be able to talk about is, well, what does it mean to be vulnerable? What does it really mean to trust someone? Whether that's in your household, whether that's outside of your household, whether that's your friend, it doesn't have to be in a romantic context. What does true consent really mean? All of those conversations are ones that we are missing out when we're trying to slap on this helmet. And I know sex education can feel like a funny thing. It can feel like, oh my god, it's so awkward, and we've misunderstood this for so long because we think it's going to open this Pandora's box of conversations and then we're never going to be able to contain this conversation. But the thing is, the Pandora's box is already open, quite frankly. And if it's not open in conversations you're having either with your friends or in classrooms, it is open very much online, right? So I really think sex education is a very vital tool because we need to have the tools to make decisions about our own bodies and about our life. We need to be able to identify, well, is this really a green flag? Am I missing something? Or is this really a red flag? Am I missing something? Do I need to ask more questions? And how can I really break this cycle of shame and of stigma? And so I really implore you to think about sex education as really going beyond, what you see in the media or vulgar pornographic representations, because that's not it. And if it helps, call it something else. You don't have to call it sex education if it makes you that uncomfortable. But the ground core driving values of mutual respect, of consent, of empathy for each other and for ourselves remains the same. Because at the end of the day, sex education is necessary. Not because it's going to be an easy or comfortable conversation. I promise you it, in my experience, has not been. But we're starting to get there as a country. But I think it's also necessary. Because sex in itself is not really a dirty word. Thank you.